All right. Thank you for joining. My name is Jon Hearty, and I work at Origin Protocol. Origin is building the blockchain platform for building decentralized marketplaces. So about 23 years ago or so, the way people transacted fundamentally changed with the inventions of eBay and Craigslist. And instead of people buying products and services from businesses directly, eBay, Craigslist, and the platforms that would follow would allow people to actually transact directly with each other in a what they would call a peer-to-peer nature. But as I'll explain, it's not quite that simple. But that being said, these companies that you see here and many others similar to them fundamentally changed the way that people transact online. And this has actually had a major impact on cities. So there are many benefits that these types of platforms provide to cities. So if you think about your Airbnbs or your Ubers, they have the possibility of increasing tourism. For example, if you're going to throw a big conference like this, it's very helpful if there is Uber in this city because people can get to and from the conference. That in turn is a part of another benefit, which is an increase in revenue. In addition to tourism, other sources of revenue, fees, etc., are also at stake here. And lastly, access. This has actually been a big one for the consumer. So if you think about people of color or people with disabilities, they've had trouble historically getting access to some of these services, taxis, etc. But these new sharing economy platforms have totally changed the way people are able to access these platforms. Now, that does come with a long list, as you can see, of concerns. What are the concerns with these sharing economies within these cities? Safety is definitely one that comes to mind. Reputation is something that is built into these systems in a lot of cases, but it's not all that is needed to provide safety to these users. So things like background checks, insurance, and inspections are also a very important part of the process. And it may vary from city to city. One city may have certain requirements that they want for ride sharing when it comes to safety or for home sharing, and other cities may have different requirements. Speaking about revenue, yes, it's a possible benefit, but is this a net increase or a decrease for the city? So yes, more people are using Airbnb and Uber. This may be providing some income to the city, but is it taking away from other things like hotels, taxis, etc.? So there's still a lot of research going on here to understand, is this actually having a positive impact to the city from a revenue perspective? And access as well. It looks like it's getting a lot better for a lot of these services compared to their alternatives, but is as good as it should be? Are people of color, disabilities, et cetera, getting enough access to these services that are very important? And how can these cities actually ensure that they're getting the access that they need and that they deserve? On the insurance side, are the consumers protected is definitely the big question to ask. And how do the requirements for a rideshare differ from just a regular person driving their own car? These are some of the questions local governments are starting to think about in the context of these sharing economies. Affordability. So are the cities getting more or less affordable? Airbnb, how is it impacting the cost of housing in this city? And lastly, and this was actually probably one of the biggest ones that cities have voiced their opinions on, which is data. These services are very centralized, and they make their money by collecting and siloing the data that they gain from these products. But the cities that want to support these sharing economies want access to this data. This data can be very valuable for them in all sorts of ways, and it does take some, it takes time and it takes relationship building to be able to work with these services and get access to the data that can help these cities grow and flourish. And so what you'll see based on one report that recently came out is that cities are starting to work very closely with these sharing economy companies. You can see here that out of the cities that were surveyed, 16% have already partnered with them in some capacity. And those that have not partnered, most of them are very open to it and very interested in it. But the sharing economy platforms have their own motivations. They have their own agenda, of course. And so they don't just hand over all the data and easily partner with these cities. It's a little bit of a negotiation. You can see in, for example, most of these sharing economies ask for forgiveness instead of permission. Airbnb and Uber went into cities. They established a user base, and then they started talking to the cities afterwards. But this seems to be changing. For example, in San Francisco, there used to be scooters everywhere. It was a big concern by a lot of the people that live there and a lot of the government officials. And so they banned all of these scooters and said, okay, we're going to reissue a few licenses, or we're going to issue a few licenses. And what they ended up doing is issuing these licenses only to operators who had not gone into their city already. So they looked for those who didn't, ask for permission, and they said, you guys cannot be part of this first wave of licenses. And they went to the new providers who had not yet gone into the city, and those were the ones that ended up getting the first set of licenses for scooters in San Francisco. So the trend seems to be that people, the sharing economies, understand that they need to work very closely with the city from the outset in order to really make sure that they are aligned with the people in the city and with the government of the city. So at Origin, we envision that one day these so-called peer-to-peer marketplaces will be actually peer-to-peer and not peer to giant corporate monopoly to peer. So although people refer to Airbnb or Uber or Craigslist, et cetera, as peer-to-peer, there's actually a company sitting in the middle. This company is collecting all of the data, hoarding this data, siloing this data, and this is what allows them to justify their very high transaction fees. But if you can remove that middleman, not only do the fees go with it, but it opens up all sorts of possibilities. So what are some of the benefits at large for the user with this new paradigm of an actually peer-to-peer marketplace? Number one, lower the fees. Sometimes these fees can get very, very high, 20, 30, 40% in some cases, just for connecting a buyer and a seller. When you remove this middleman, those fees go with it, and a lot of other things. There's a lot of other advantages as well. So, for example, you're able to redistribute value within these networks much more fairly. If you think about the first Airbnb host or the first Uber driver, what are they doing today? Probably still hosting their home on Airbnb and driving for Uber, but probably making a lot less than they were at the beginning. Because as these services gain in popularity and become more of a monopoly, they're able to collect higher and higher fees, and the consumer ends up actually getting less and less power and ends up on the wrong side of things. So with the blockchain, in our case, we're built on top of Ethereum, you can allow two parties to directly transact with each other. And because these are based on crypto economic principles, you can actually allow the early participants of these networks to benefit from the growth of the network itself, rather than just the founders or just the investors making tons of money and leaving, the early users that really helped to grow the network in its early days benefit along the way as well. One other major advantage is to promote free and open commerce. So many cities around the world actually have banned Airbnb, banned Uber, and these users in these cities actually don't have access to some of these services that many of us have come to use, daily or very regularly. But without the centralized single point of failure that the Airbnbs or Ubers represent, it makes it much more difficult for a government to come in and ban all the listings, or in San Francisco, Airbnb removed 50% of all the home listings on their service in San Francisco in one day. It was a big hit to the consumer there. If you wanted to stay in San Francisco, it was very difficult. Prices went up, etc. And whether or not you actually agree with the reason that they did this, it's scary to think that this single point of failure can make it so easy for a government to come in and regulate or censor some of these services that people want to use. And perhaps the most interesting and longest term benefit of this new paradigm of these marketplaces being truly peer-to-peer built on the blockchain is that you can actually serve the unbanked. There are billions of people throughout the world who don't have access to a credit card or a bank account that is required to use these sharing economies, but they do have access to a cheap Android phone with a cryptocurrency wallet, and they very well may leapfrog these traditional finance systems, and their first experience in one of these sharing economies may be on something powered by the blockchain that does not require them to use a credit card or a bank account. So we're really excited about what this can do for some of these underserved populations in the world. As far as the way we're doing this, we are not building an Airbnb, we are not building an Uber, we are building technology that will allow businesses and developers to quickly and easily create these marketplaces. So we envision many, many marketplaces all throughout the world. Instead of having one Airbnb that covers the entire world, we're excited to see some localized home sharing services. So for example, we're in Barcelona. You could imagine a home sharing service that just focuses on Barcelona, better understands the culture, the people here, etc., and better serves the consumer at the end of the day. So this is actually real. This is live. Many of these crypto projects are very theoretical. We actually are live. You can see this right now. If you go to dap.originprotocol.com, there is a real live buy and sell style marketplace that allows you to list an item and buy an item and transact directly with the other person, the person on the other end. So I encourage you to check it out. There's a lot of work to do, of course, but we are making progress very quickly. And this is the general idea of how we decided to go about building this. So at the very base layer, you have open source protocols. We do everything out in the open. We want to get as much collaboration as possible. So we have a set of smart contracts that are built on Ethereum. Things like, how do you represent a listing on the blockchain? How do you represent identity, which is something we'll talk a little bit more about because it's very important to this. So that's at the base layer. And then on top of that, we've built a JavaScript library. And the idea here is not a lot of people know how Ethereum works. They don't know how a smart contract works. They don't know how to build it. But almost all developers know JavaScript. So we want to put this powerful infrastructure in the hands of as many developers as possible. And we're also going to be working on a white labeling product as well. So even if you maybe aren't a developer, but you want to build one of these marketplaces, you'll be able to do so in just a few clicks. And then on top of it is our DApp, our decentralized application. You saw the screenshot of it in the previous slide, but we've built an actual application on top of this technology ourselves. But again, we're really mostly looking forward to all of the other companies, all of the other developers that build on top of this technology. So I mentioned identity. Identity is probably the most important problem to solve for these peer-to-peer marketplaces. Once you solve identity, you're able to solve things like reputation and dispute resolution much more easily. So these centralized alternatives that we all use today, this is a big part of what they do. They make it easy for me to understand who the person is on the other end of this transaction. Who am I renting this home from? Whose car am I getting in, etc. In the world of blockchain, you allow two parties to do this in a trustless way. So the way we have gone about it here is we've adopted what's called the ERC 725 standard. This standard was created by a gentleman named Fabian Vogelsteller, who was the creator of the ERC20 token, which is what most of these ICOs that you've seen are based off of. And the way it works is it allows a user to tie their wallet address, their Ethereum wallet address, to a number of different things. So I can make certain claims. So I can say, my name is Jon Hearty, I work at Origin, and these can be associated with my Ethereum wallet address. But additionally, I can allow third parties to make attestations. So I can allow, in this case, Origin, to cryptographically prove that I am both the owner of this Ethereum wallet address and a certain phone number, a certain email address, certain Facebook account, Twitter profile, etc. So you no longer need a third party in the middle to do this verification and trusted piece. You don't have to actually know, do I trust this third party, etc. It's cryptographically proven. And we actually will also give you optionality. So maybe you want one service to actually do this attestation, or maybe you want another service to do it. Today, we are providing this, but if you want somebody else, maybe you could see the DMV doing an attestation saying, this is this person's driver's license, or somebody could, the US post office could send a postcard to a mailbox with a code on it, and then they punch the code in, and now you can say, okay, this person has access to this mailbox. So the idea is there will be many, many different types of attestations depending on what makes sense for any given marketplace. But by doing this out in the open and adopting this open source standard, it allows for what we're calling shared network effects. So think about today, you go to Airbnb, you sign in, you give them your email address, and you create a password, and now you have a profile in the world of Airbnb. But if I want to go sign up for Uber, I have to run through the same process all over again. With this open source standard that we've used, I can sign up once, and now this identity and potentially my reputation as well can actually transfer to all other services and marketplaces, in this case, that are building on Origin, but also any other company that is adopting this same ERC 725 standard. So we're really excited about these shared network effects. We think it can make it much easier for not only the user when it comes to going from service to service, but for these marketplaces themselves. They now have access to a much larger user pool. So like I mentioned, we're not doing this alone. We do this open source as much as we can, and we created what's called the ERC 725 Alliance, which is many other projects that have committed to using this standard for their identity. So this is interesting because maybe I sign up for an Origin-powered marketplace, but there's some totally different type of company that has nothing to do with peer-to-peer marketplaces that's decided to use this standard. Now my identity is still portable across all of these other projects. So if you want to learn more about this, you can check out erc725alliance.org. We're really excited about all the projects coming together for it. We also have created a simple chat interface within our platform. It seems very simple. It's something people expect. You go to one of these services, you want to talk to the person on the other end. But today, all of these messaging systems are all, again, centralized. So you're not really sending this person a message directly. You're sending it to a central server, and then that central server is sending it to the person. What we've built is actually peer-to-peer. It's totally encrypted end-to-end, and it allows you to have a safe, secure conversation with another person. And it feels just like the centralized messaging that you're used to today, but there's nobody sitting in the middle, no server sitting in the middle that's able to see this conversation, except if you guys get into a dispute. So we've built it in a way that allows for a third party to actually audit these messages in the event of a dispute. So we want to make sure that if something goes wrong, a third party can come in, see what happened, and make a judgment. And one of the biggest problems today with these blockchain-powered applications is user experience. So to use the web version of the marketplace I showed you earlier, you need a browser extension, something called MetaMask. And there's all sorts of reasons why it's very difficult to use one of these decentralized applications today. And there's a lot of very smart people trying to fix these issues to make it so that when you use one of them, you feel like you're just using any other service, any other system. And to that end, we've built basically a mobile wallet. So even if you don't have one of these browser extensions, you can just use your mobile phone to approve transactions and sign these transactions. And still, it's protecting your privacy. It's still encrypted, and it's still truly peer-to-peer. And another issue that we face at Origin is cost. So the nature of the Ethereum blockchain requires transaction fees. In order to do certain things, you have to pay what's called a gas cost. So this is definitely prohibitive to your average user, but we're working on ways that will allow the marketplace themselves to actually cover these costs. So again, for the user, it feels just like a very normal experience. They're going and using a service, and they don't exactly need to know what's happening behind the scenes. Just like when you go to Amazon and you purchase something, you know, they're connecting to, they use AWS, they're connecting to all sorts of different services in the background, but you don't really know that as a consumer. You just press a button, you get what you want delivered to your home. This is what we need in the space today, and this is what everybody is aiming for, is you feel, you know, you don't even necessarily need to know that the service you're using is actually built on the blockchain, but you're still getting all the advantages that come with that. So this is our team here. The main reason I included this is because there are a lot of very, very smart, well-respected people coming into this space. So this guy right here in the middle, his name's Yupan. We hired him 5 or 6 months ago. He was one of 6 co-founders of PayPal and the first employee at YouTube. And so, you know, he is here because he loves this technology. He's really excited about this web, what, you know, a lot of people call Web 3.0. And a couple other people in these pictures were also very early at PayPal and YouTube. So these are the guys that built Web 2.0, built some products with mass consumer adoption, and they've moved over to this new space because they're really excited about, you know, what this can actually produce. We've also raised money from, you know, funds, very well-respected angel investors, et cetera. A lot of people are excited about this new peer-to-peer future. And we've also got quite a bit of companies and marketplaces that have committed to building on this. We're actually excited, and the reason we're here is we're excited to see, you know, what cities want to get involved in this process. What cities, you know, cities are already subsidizing or participating in certain things like bike sharing, scooter sharing, et cetera. So we're really excited to partner with some of these cities and local governments to see what kind of peer-to-peer marketplaces we can build with their help. And like I mentioned, this is all open source. We have over 50 contributors from all over the world that have joined just to help. Not all of them work for Origin. A lot of them are just excited about what we're doing. They're excited about blockchain. They're excited about this decentralized future. And so everybody and anybody is invited to come help and come contribute. So there's all sorts of ways to get involved. Developers, of course, can contribute to the open source code base. Any sort of marketplace, anything that's peer-to-peer is a really good fit for Origin. We talk a lot about the sharing economy. We bring up Airbnb and Uber quite a bit. This isn't because these are the only sharing economies that are interesting or relevant. It's just because that's what people think about when they think about the sharing economy. But any sort of peer-to-peer marketplace is ripe for disruption with this type of infrastructure and technology. So I've mentioned very basic ones like Craigslist or eBay. You know, they're not sharing economies, but still very good fits. So if you guys want to learn more about Origin, there's quite a few resources here. Our website, of course, is originprotocol.com. Not only do we do all of our actual coding in an open source fashion, but all of our communication, all of our collaboration is actually out in the open as well. So every week we host a public engineering call that anybody can join, and we talk about what we're working on. We introduce people that are new to, new contributors, anybody that's interested in working with us. We get them involved, and again, this is a very long-term vision. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. You're definitely not going to see a decentralized Uber tomorrow, mostly for technological reasons, right? There's all sorts of scaling issues, et cetera, that it's going to take some time to get there. But like I've said before, there are many, many, many smart people and many smart teams getting involved, not just in Origin, but in all of the projects that are going to really help this entire wave, this entire movement of getting an actual, peer-to-peer marketplace going. People often talk about the potential of blockchain to cut out the middleman. I've said it before, and many, many people have said it. Everybody from anarchists to Wall Street to technologists, this is something that they see as obvious and inevitable. But I think to be a little bit more specific, it's probably likely that the middlemen won't get cut out entirely. What you're going to see instead, in my opinion, is that these middlemen will be forced to justify their fees with the value that they provide. So these fees that get to 20, 30, 40%, sometimes much higher in extreme cases, they are largely just for matching the buyer and the seller. They do provide other services a lot of times, things like insurance, dispute resolution, but are these additional services, are insurance and dispute resolution, worth 40% of the transaction every time? Probably not. So we think this is going to level the playing field, and we're really excited about how blockchain can help change what this middleman is doing and force their hand and make sure that they're actually delivering value for these high transaction fees. I guess that's it. Is there any questions at all about Origin or what we're up to or how it relates to the cities? All right. Well, if you guys have any questions, feel free to come grab me after this. You can also email me here, Jon, Jon, @originprotocol.com. And looking forward to hearing from you.